Ladies and gentlemen, this is According to Callus. It is Friday, July the 2nd. Unfortunately, I had to miss out on July the 1st, but I'll be back in just a moment to tell you why. It was time to celebrate, so I got together with family and friends. Family mostly, actually, family only. Ha ha ha. But it was a birthday nonetheless, and we celebrated. Yes, July is full of birthdays in my family and in my country. Now, for those of you who are not aware, July the 2nd is in fact the birth of these United States. We just celebrated on July the 4th. July the 2nd is the date that the Lee Amendment was ratified, which made the Declaration of Independent States. If you don't believe me, you should look it up. Even if you do believe me, you should still look it up. I would source it through Chris Ann Hall, since she's done extensive study on this and is very well versed on these issues. If you choose not to, there is various other Wikipedia-style things online, including other options other than Wikipedia, such as Infogalactic. That being said, this is an important time because 1776, and it's now 2021. We are 245 years into this, and since we haven't done a very good job of maintaining control over the government that we created, we have basically allowed our government to destroy our country. Now, there are those of you that were satisfied, enthusiastic, and hopeful that the last president was going to be our salvation for our bad government woes. And no matter how good or bad you think the Donald was, he was never the salvation for our nation. Problem number one is we are supposed to be 50 independent sovereign states that have compacted together to create a federal government to maintain a national defense and basically negotiate with other foreign nations in the issues of trade or other defense pacts, if you will. Unfortunately, we in the individual states have basically, and I'm using that word again, aren't I? We have allowed for our sovereignty to be given up. We have allowed for our independence to be given up, basically for a loaf of bread. Yes, that word again, basically. It's infuriating to me that we sold our soul for a little bit of mammon. Interestingly enough, that is a common theme throughout all of history. People will trade their liberty, trade their freedom for a little bit of perceived security. And then when they find out that security is not really security at all, but a form of slavery, eventually the resentment builds up enough that they remove that impediment. They remove that tyranny. They break those chains of bondage. They free themselves for several generations until the next generation comes along who knew not what it was to be free and willingly subjugates themselves and accepts the boot of tyranny upon their neck, upon their back, upon their shoulders, and they just carry on. Now, whether it's something as simple as property tax, whereby you can never actually own your property because you're paying rent to the entity that you live in for the quote-unquote privilege to stay on the property that you allegedly own. Now, I know there's people that have done lots of studies on this, and they basically, yes, there's that word again, imply that An allodial title would be a way to end that problem. A non-revocable allodial title. And while that is perhaps the solution, just removing the ability for any form of government to tax property would do the same thing. But we allow that. You got to ask yourself, why do we allow that? Well, we allowed it for the payment of school districts. Interestingly enough, those same school districts have taught our children how to be good little drones, good little obedient automatons. Not to question their masters, not to think for themselves, but just to obey and be good little workers. Now, there are some in my friend group, or there are some acquaintances I might have, that believe that the school systems have failed. But no. That's not it at all. They have succeeded. They have done exactly what their founders and their funders desired and envisioned. Indeed, John Dewey, an educational philosopher, is quoted in saying back in 1899, check that number again, 1899. That was 122 years ago. They said, children who know how to think for themselves spoil the harmony of the collective society that is coming, where everyone would be interdependent. Now, I guess in some regards, a little interdependence is normal and kind of the way things have always been. But mandated interdependency takes away independency. It removes liberty and freedom as we might know it, and it subjugates those same children and their minds to another authority. Now, in my world, children are subject to their parents until such time that they can prove themselves independent. Now, the law typically says that is at 18 or 21. And now really, since we have the ability to carry our children on our health insurance until they're 26, it seems as though the government basically doesn't consider young people to be adults until they're 26 years of age. Unless, of course, they want to send you into a war where you can kill or be killed at age 18. But if you want to own a firearm or you want to have a drink, then you got to be 21. So it seems to be very, very arbitrary. It seems to be very inconsistent. Indeed, I'm really at a loss as why our federal government, who really doesn't have any authority to do such a thing, mandates such things onto the independent sovereign states. Now, if Texas were to truly be an independent sovereign state, they might actually do something about that. They might actually, for instance, celebrate Independence Day on July 2nd, which would be the appropriate day. They may, in fact, remind the federal government in various ways that they don't have the authority to do those things. They never ceded that authority to the federal government. In fact, the Bill of Rights is quite clear. It says Congress shall make no law, yet Congress continues to make laws. And because a part of the government says, well, it's okay, that suddenly it's okay. And it's not. All it would take is one state to say, that's fine. You've made your determination, SCOTUS. You've made your determination, Congress. But we in the sovereign state of Texas, or Alabama, or Wisconsin, or Alaska, or even California or Vermont, we don't recognize your authority over that issue. We did not grant you that authority. In fact, the Constitution is quite clear that you have no authority on that issue. And this is what our law is, and this is what we're going to enforce. And, oh, by the way, if you should come to our state, our independent sovereign state, and trying to enforce a law of which you have no authority or no permission or no purpose for being involved in, we will remove you and or arrest you, Mr. ATF, FBI, IRS, BATF. I guess that's technically the same thing, isn't it? Right? So you various alphabet soup agencies that really shouldn't exist constitutionally. When you come into our state uninvited, we will remove you. Now, sadly, at this point in history, that seems likely to be a pipe dream. It sadly seems that our independent sovereign states like subjugating themselves. They find it easy to get that money back from the feds. They just turn a blind eye to the abuses from BLM. That would be the Bureau of Land Management, not the other group, or the EPA, or OSHA. These bureaucratic agencies have no constitutional basis for their existence. While their rules or ideas may have started out as good ideas or may have had good intentions, we all know that the road is paved with those good intentions. We all know that we pay the consequences long term for those intentions. So we should not and cannot continue to abide by things that are not constitutionally permissible. But the Constitution in and of itself will not save us. The Constitution in and of itself has no authority unless we enforce it. Now, I have an acquaintance of mine who routinely puts a bill forward before our state legislature calling for constitutional enforcement. Now, this acquaintance of mine is an attorney. He's older and smarter than I am, and he has written a heck of a good bill, and they do nothing with it. Now, we were successful in getting that added into the Platform Resolutions Committee coming out of Collin County, but it went to the state, and honestly, I don't remember, because of the mess that was our state convention, if it was actually ratified out of the state convention, but the state legislature has done nothing with it. Nothing. Now, I know there are many of our people here that think, well, we have a clear majority in the state Senate and the clear majority, or lesser so, but clear majority in the state house. Why do we not get these things done? That's a very good question. Now, I'm going to take a moment here and basically say, yeah, I know that word again, that the problem is not in Collin County. The problem is the rest of the state. The problem is all these representatives and state senators out there seem to forget, number one, who they work for, and number two, who they're representing, the sovereign state of Texas. They don't wish to assert or insert the independents into this debate. They don't wish to remind the federal government that the federal government was created by the individual states, and every state that's been admitted has equal sovereignty with the original states, and they in fact have the authority over the federal government. No. They would rather just play along, go along. Indeed, our own governor decided that he was going to become dictator for a time because of an emergency. Yeah, he doesn't have that authority. And yet, our very own state legislature couldn't do anything about that either. They couldn't put themselves together. Now, I would think that if the Democrats did not want Republicans to abuse power at the state level, they might have been on board with this. But I think the Republicans were the bigger disappointment, as in they were the ones that were complaining the loudest, but did the least to put an end to the abuses put upon us by the executive branch. Now, I know by and large why the Democrats won't end that, because they know at some point in the future, they may wish it sooner, but I'm hopeful that it'll be latter, they will be in charge. And when they're in charge, they'll be able to do the same thing as well. Indeed, they think executive orders carry the same weight as a law. Well, that's not actually how it works. Now, if our local police, if our local sheriff enforces an executive order as if it's a law, then yeah, we face the same penalty. But once it goes before a court, presumably not one that's beholden to the governor, we will get a fair verdict, a fair opinion out of that court, indicating that, yes, that was wrong. That executive order is not effective. There is no authority for the governor or the state government to do that. So no, that cannot stand. I'm not really hopeful on that, to be quite honest with you, but we will continue to carry forward on that idea. So again, as we reflect on the idea that today, July 2nd, is the anniversary of the creation of these United States, we have to also wonder just what it is that is going on at the national level that continues to interfere with what's going on our independent sovereign states' territory. Whether it's bad laws, bad executive orders, it's always the same problem. They're going to do what they can get away with and hope that they drag it out before it gets to the courts, that it just somehow becomes permissible because it's been going on for long enough. Well, my friends, that's not the way that's supposed to work. My friends, that is not a constitutional republic. That is not a democracy even. For those of you that want to believe that this is democracy, even with mob rule, one person doesn't get to make a decision for all of us. Remember that. As a representative republic, we pick people, we support, we vote them in, and we send them to represent us. They are supposed to work for us. They're not supposed to kowtow for a single individual or group of individuals and allow them to run roughshod over the state constitution. Indeed, our very own governor violated the Texas state constitution multiple times. That is actually noted in the Texas 5-Star Plan book, exactly which portions of the Constitution he's violated. By that alone, he ought to be impeached. But we know that the state legislature, run by Republicans, is not going to impeach another Republican. Now, I understand some of the political ramifications if that were to occur. I got a pretty good idea how that would play out, and that would not be an ideal situation. So then there's the call for, well, we should censure the governor at the county level. Now, I'm very sympathetic to this. The county office of the parties, if you will, should have quite a bit of influence, particularly in the state reps and the state senators. And if we're continuing to censure an individual, that would maybe force somebody else's hand. But again, the governor still has a large plurality of supporters with R's after their name. And honestly, the D's have no dog in this hunt. I think they fear somebody other than Governor Abbott being the governor because they can't win at the state level yet. So they would rather have the devil they know than the devil they don't. Could you imagine if somebody like Don Huffines were to become the next governor? If he gets in there and actually rolls back and has some of these abusive executive powers taken away by the state legislature, by his own volition, he helps them push it through. Could you imagine if they actually were to get a governor that wanted to lead in a way that enhanced liberty? Now, just to be clear, I'm using Don Huffines as an example. That is not the purpose to, be some ringing endorsement of the guy, although I personally have endorsed him. On my podcast, I try and stay as objective as possible. I try and not bring in individuals, particularly those that are running for office, at this point in the game. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to let you envision a different way of looking at things, a different way that the governorship could be run, a different way that the state government could operate, where they could recognize the principles of 1776, that they could take the principles and apply them to now. To tell the feds, no, you're wrong and we're not going to do that. To tell abusive, tyrannical bureaucracies, no, you're wrong, shut up, go away. We're not going to allow that here. This is the sovereign state of Texas, and BLM or EPA, you don't have authority to make these decisions for us. There's the door. There's our border. Sometimes I wonder if in the state of Texas we're worried about the wrong border. Perhaps if we spent more time keeping out the feds or some of these lefties coming down from the Northeast, or California for that matter, if we wouldn't be in better shape. But some of the sad facts is that our own children, your potential grandchildren, have been brainwashed by 12 to 16 years of that education that we're forced to pay for, but we don't pay attention to. Remember what I said. The education is working exactly how the promoters and the providers of the state-sponsored education organization wanted it. They are churning out thousands of little drones every year. Millions of young people have no clue how the government is supposed to work or how liberty functions. They just don't know. And it's our fault because we continue to send them back to be brainwashed. Now, I know some of us can't, we can't do private school. We don't have the ability to do homeschool. I get it. Been there, done that. The only thing I haven't done is homeschooled my children, right? But I did the private school thing. I did the government school thing. There's pluses and minuses to both of those. A lot more pluses to the private school, to be honest. But there are advantages to everything, and you have to make that decision of what's best for you and your family. But when you send your children off to schools and they're coming home being fed tripe, we're all listening to everybody freak out about critical race theory right now, but the critical theory has been in the school board, in the school districts for years, and nobody caught it. Nobody said anything. Indeed, they've been reimagining history for decades. They've been rewriting how they teach your math for a decade, and we did nothing. If you want to fix things, if you want to go forward in the spirit of 76, and with the promise of liberty and freedom, you have to fix it. Well, you still can. You have to engage with your children at home, your grandchildren at home. You have to teach them the right things. Do not be afraid. I would put up the quote-unquote bad education of 50 years ago versus the bad education of now. I would put up the bad education that I had in the 70s and 80s against the bad education now. We don't need more socialism. We don't need more Marxist ideology. We don't need more social justice. We need justice. We need understanding of what justice is. But those folks are not teaching that. Those policies and those procedures do not bring about justice. They don't care about that. They care about power. That is why they're okay with Governor Abbott seizing power as the governor, and they don't wish to fight back, even though he's their perceived enemy, because they know at some point in the future that's going to be them. They're going to be in charge, and they're going to get to abuse that power, and we are not going to be able to stop them. So, my fellow conservative friends, you are the problem. We've continued to tolerate that. We've continued to sleep as the school district has turned our children against us. We've continued to sleep as our city governments basically, I know it's that word again, are destroying the cities that we live in or the communities that we live in by upending the demographic layout of them. When people move to the suburbs, they want a suburban lifestyle. When people move to the cities, they want a city lifestyle. Bringing more city to the suburbs does not improve the suburb. Likewise, I'm not sure that bringing more suburbs to the city improves the city. People choose to live in locations because that's what they want. They want a certain aesthetic. Now, we can make all the claims we want about affordable or attainable housing, and that's all well and good. But in this time and place, we have a more mobile population than we've ever had. We have a more socially and economically mobile opportunity than at the moment, it's less than what it was 3 years ago. But in general, it's better than what it's been probably ever in history. And that's not even fair because
100 years ago, for most people, you were far more free and had far more opportunities to succeed and do very well in the United States. Now, I will grant you, there was a section of the population that did not have full advantage of that. But I will also suggest that the solutions were actually worse than the disease. When you foment distrust, when you foment, for lack of a better word, hate between groups, there are repercussions to that. There are bad things that happen because of that. And you know what? Government's there just to step in and offer that little solution. Oh, just give us a little bit more power. Give us just a little bit more influence. Give us just a little bit more ability to peer into people's private lives. Just one more camera. Just one more intelligence agency. We'll make you safe. We'll protect you. It'll all be better. But what the reality is, that's not what happens. That's not what the end game is. That's not the solution. That's the problem. Whatever pre-existing problems there were in humankind and mankind, however you want to say it, government only makes it worse. Government only exacerbates problems. The temporary fix that they offer only brings about more problems in the future. Now, I don't know why I have to remind people this time and time again, but if you'll just look to history. Now, I know they don't teach history well, but if you'll just look right on the surface, you'll see that the vast majority in China were not better off under communism. Not when Chairman Mao was in charge. The vast majority of people in Russia did not get a leg up after Lenin took over. The vast majority of people in Germany, long term, ended up far worse off after the National Socialists had run their country than before. Look at Italy. The National Socialists down there, aka the fascists, ruined that country as well. Look at what happened in Yugoslavia. Oh, they kept that steel boot on everybody's neck. They all hated the government, but as soon as the government went away, it blew up. They had a multifaceted battle royale for the better part of 2 decades. Now, maybe, just maybe, most of that's been dealt with. But if you want to see an example of replacement theory in place, look at Kosovo. Look at how that played out. Then magnify that into what's playing out in the southwest of the United States. Just saying. When you look at the strife that's built up and you look at the consequences of totalitarian, socialist, communist regimes, those countries are never better off. Whether it's Argentina, Venezuela, Brazil, Cuba, they're never better off. Oh, short term, they can steal enough stuff to make it look good and shiny for just a little while. But give it some time, and it fails. And if you want to know what the problem in the United States is, I can tell you. It's too much government. It's the collusion between large corporations and government. Some of us would call that fascism. Some of us know exactly what's playing out. The problem is, our forefathers were asleep at the switch. The opportunity to fix this while it was still in its infancy has long since passed. Our only hope is it will die a sudden death without destroying the rest of the country. The other options are just not very pleasant, and I don't wish to think about them. But I would encourage you, as Michael Bolden says, think locally, act locally. Ha ha ha. No, actually he doesn't. That's Brian McClanahan. I am so sorry. Michael Bolden's at 10th Amendment Center, and he talks about how the states have the ultimate authority, and the states need to seize that authority and hold it up as a bailiwick against federal encroachment. Is Michael Bolden that has been working tirelessly for a decade to get these states to assert their sovereignty. Likewise, Brian McClanahan has been taking that battle down to the local level. He's been reminding people that local authorities are those that are closest to you and have a direct influence to what's happening. Between those two guys, there's just so much work that we could do. There's so much positive things that can come about if we would just put in the time and the effort. Our enemies, our opponents have been doing it for decades, and look at where we're at now. Look at the false bill of goods they've sold an entire generation of young people. Look at false bill of goods they've sold to 90% of an ethnic group that really shouldn't trust government at all, but they believe government's going to fix it for them. I'm at an utter loss as to how that happened, but I do know what we can do to fix it. Read the Texas 5-Star Plan. Listen to Michael Bolden at the 10th Amendment Center. Read his articles. Look up, study what Brian McClanahan puts out. Yeah, you don't have to like the South to understand what he's talking about. But there were a lot of guys in the South that far better understood what the outcome of a nationalist government was going to be, of the Lincolnian nationalism that we live under now, of the fascist regime that seeks to run everybody's life. They knew what was coming. Whether they knew the name of it, but they could see the future. We can see the future now if we just are patient. We observe history, we observe current events, and just see the direction things are going. I don't wish to experience Venezuela. I don't wish to explain Yugoslavia. I don't wish to see the outcome of Rwanda, South Africa, Zimbabwe. I don't wish to try and reduplicate what happened in Argentina. I think Russia generally got lucky. Yeah, they broke up, but it was rather peacefully. Yeah, the oligarchs, or the mafia, if you will, former KGB, took over large sections of government. But they didn't have the war and strife that followed in all those other cities and countries. They didn't have decades of war like Yugoslavia. Now, I'm not suggesting that life in Russia is better than what it is here. No, not at all. I'm just saying that if Russia could break up without full-scale war, maybe that's something we should consider if we can't fix it. Just saying. Well, this is, according to Callus, this is Friday, July the 2nd, Independence Day. I missed the first. I'll probably do a bonus or a makeup episode on Saturday. Ladies and gentlemen, I will see you on the other side. Have a great weekend, an Independence Day weekend at that. Thank you.